Hello, it's Sean from Billy Goat Wargaming once again with another painting video. I'm going to try something slightly different today, just as a result of some feedback that I've had. But today I'm going to be painting the 3rd Continental Dragoons for the War of Independence. So these have the helmet, I don't know if it could be described as a less tall helmet with a white crest on it. They're actually sold as British Dragoons, and I think specifically it's either the 16th or 17th Dragoons, I forget which, for the British. But at this scale I think you can absolutely get away with painting them as the 3rd Continental Light Dragoons. They'll have a white coat with the blue facings. And there's only 6 of them because you don't need too many. It's 3 bases for the Rules Washington's Army, and at the same time I'll be painting their dismounts to go with them as well because we need dismounts. So the little bit of a different thing is I'm only going to use this paint set apart from the wash for reasons I've described before. This Army Painter Strong Tone just stains the figure too much for me, but I will only be using the paints that come in this set. This is a starter paint set from Army Painter. It may be the last time I use this because I've got another starter set coming from a company that is now sponsoring me through the God's Own Scale podcast and by association, the Billy Goat Wargaming YouTube channel, and that's Coat Arms. So I'm getting the starter set from them, and I will do a similar thing using just paints from a starter set. So this is really to show that you don't need a lot of paints to paint Wargames figures. There are 12 here, and let's count it as 11 because we won't count the strong tone paint. But you've got all the colours you need really. You've got a red, a green, a black, a yellow, a blue, a brown, a grey, a white, and this sort of bony colour plus a metallic. So let's see what we can do, and let's see if we can get these figures looking something like, now let's see if I can get this in front of the camera without knocking it over, something like this unit, who are the 3rd Continental Light Dragoons from 1781. And it says, this unit along with the 2nd Continental Light Dragoons developed into a crack outfit. Its performance in 1781 at Cowpens and the Guildford Courthouse was exemplary and showed that well-led cavalry could do on the battlefield against infantry and cavalry. This uniform was prescribed in the regulations and used in practice. And just for the record, there's the 2nd Continental Light Dragoons, whose helmet is a little bit taller, and you might use the other type of Dragoon that Peter Pig do, which I can actually show you here. So you can probably see there the helmet is slightly different to this one. It's got a higher profile. So I think if I was to paint the 2nd Continental Light Dragoons, I would use those, but for now I'm going to be painting the 3rd Continental Dragoons using these figures. Okay, out of those 12 paints then, these are the ones that I think I'm probably going to use. The red and the black are there to alter the colour of this brown. So this is the leather brown, which, as I've mentioned before, is one of my favourite browns that I use. But to give some different tones to the horses, and there's only 6 of them, so I don't need a massive amount, and certainly I could paint one, maybe the bugler or the officer in a white horse. So I don't need a massive amount of variation, but I'll take a little bit of mixing just to get some variation on the horse there. So that's what we're going to do. We've got our regulation palette, the Billy Goat Wargaming palette, available in all good toy shops, and the Billy Goat Wargaming absorbent tissue, and the Billy Goat Wargaming branded water pot. Okay, so here we go. So a lot of my painting style is to do with sort of colour by numbers, I suppose, and it's about getting the colour just in the right place, and not worrying too much, as I said before, about making mistakes. So there's a black strap that goes across the body, which is obviously not needed to be painted. So the first thing I'm going to do is put the blue on the cuffs, and there's a tiny area. Let's see if this will focus. There's a tiny area in here that will have a little bit of that lapel showing, and I'm just going to sort of dot it and come down onto the cuff as well. Now I really need to practice getting sort of a standard distance away from the figure, but close enough so that I can see it. So it's all a little bit Heath Robinson at the moment in this approach. Now I do have some exciting news, and that I'm currently awaiting the delivery of some equipment recommended by Geek Gaming, Luke at the Luke's APS YouTube channel. So what we'll have is, instead of this tripod that's very inconveniently right in front of me, in between me and the camera, me and the figure, sorry, there'll be what's called a boom arm, on which my camera can sit without unduly interfering with me getting to the model that I'm painting. Which is, believe you me, very exciting. Now you'll see here that I undercoated these a good while ago, and I tend to drop my figures a lot, and some of the undercoats come off there, but I'm not too worried about that, to be honest, because once I put the paint on there we go. I think that's probably the optimal distance. The other thing is quite a decent lapel microphone I've got coming, so my voice should be less poppy, pop, which is what you can hear sometimes, because I'm just using the microphone off the camera here. Now I'm taking it, there's no sort of reversal of colours with this unit. I don't actually know, but for my version of the 3rd Continental Light Dragoons, there'll be no reversal of colours for the musician. So again, this is a case of painting inside out, because it's the easiest to get to, and if you do make a horrendous error, then you can repair it relatively quickly. But I am talking about, you know, a complete slip across the whole of the that makes it ridiculous not to repair it, because minor mistakes I will ignore, but obviously there's some mistakes that you can't ignore. Now, you might not actually be able to see very well what I'm doing here, which is just trying to catch this lapel, and I've used that. Actually, I don't think I've done it on these. Yeah, I haven't done my sort of grey undercoat, grey dry brush over the top of these, but never mind, never fear, never fear. Plough on, get them done. I'm not stopping because I want these figures painted. I've had them for some time in this condition, and I just want them finished. And it's about, as I've said many times, about getting the figures on the table. I paint to play, not display. That is my motto. So I'm really not too fussy. Now, there are blue turnbacks, but actually you can see the turnbacks, so I need to do that. There's one like that, and a tickle there. A lot of tickling goes on with my figures. It's about blobs and lines a lot of the time. Figure painting is. So these figures are ostensibly for, and by that I mean principally, the Peter Pig rules, called, what are they called? Washington's Army. However, they could be used for any AWI rules, whether that be skirmish or not. It matters not, but that is my chosen preferred set of rules with one or two house amendments. There we go. And within the Washington's Army rulebook, there is bit of brand placement there. There are numerous historical scenarios to play the principal battles of the War of Independence. So Guildford Courthouse, Cowpens, Bunker Hill, and so on. So what I want with the collection is to have enough figures to paint all of those battles. And as you heard, this specific unit, fought at Cowpens and Guildford Courthouse. So, although I don't normally paint specific units, I just paint the units that I like the look of. I'm not too worried about using the 44th foot instead of the 76th foot. I've just made those numbers up. This unit just so happens to be one that was present at the Battle of Cowpens. So there we go, that's the blue. So really it's 6 horses and 12 figures I'm painting here. Okay, there is an element of making a decision as to what to paint next. And I think what I will do That's interesting. They don't carry, are they? Oh no, they are there. So there's the carbine. I'm going to paint the browns next, I think. So that will include probably, let's say, 3 of the horses in this colour. So just to give you an example of how I paint the horses. Now, because it's black undercoated, it is literally blobs and lines in between the various bits of harness. I'm probably only going halfway down the leg because you'll find a lot of horses have very dark lower legs. So I'm not going to fuss around it too much. I've just realised I've forgotten the sort of turban that they've got around the helmet, so I'm going to have to go back to the blue in a second. But so I showed you this flagpole which the undercoat had come off from, but there you go, mended. And let's just tickle the back of his head for the hair. And because this is the sort of the command figures, I'm going to probably only paint one horse in this brown. The other will get a different colour. Now the top of their boots was sort of a leathery brown colour. This is the carbine, again just missing the metal bits to make the painting easier. And then filling in the flanks of this horse, only going sort of halfway down the legs. I may do some socks on these horses. Some people really don't like painting horses, and I've got a love-hate relationship with painting horses. But I honestly think that with a black undercoat, half the work is done for you already. Let's give the trumpeter a black horse, and what I'm going to do is leave the nose black, because the nose on a lot of horses is black, or the muzzle. Is it a muzzle? I used to own a horse, and I don't know the answer to that. So there's actually brownish horse furniture as well, so I can get that done. Some people might rail against me using the same brown for the horse furniture as well as the coat of the horse, but in the grand scheme of things, does it really matter? Do you need 5 different shades of brown to delineate each individual part of the figure? And I think the answer is no. You may notice this is the brush with the stray hair, and you may see that, but I'm persevering with it. It's been an old faithful brush. Its days aren't quite over yet. They're nearly over, but not quite. So we are persevering and continuing with it. So we'll go back and just tickle in the saddle and blanket. These figures. I've done the top of the boot, yeah. So I just need to go back and do the top of the boots. Here, there's the pistol holster. Let's just get a little bit in there. There we go. So I'm in a rare vein of form at the moment, painting figures, and it's quite, I'm really enjoying it. I think doing these videos really helps, actually. I'm not saying I'll be painting every single figure. Slight interruption of service there as my wife came home unexpectedly, talking on the phone, and you may have picked some of that up. I do apologise. Okay, so just carried on these guys. Oop. He's not a brown horse, he is. One thing I do tend to do on all my horses, but, sorry, not on all horses, on one horse in every unit, is give a brown horse a cream mane and tail, and that, as opposed to being anything specifically realistic or how all horses are, is a tribute to an old mate of mine who's no longer with us, Martin Smith, because he always had, he always did it. It was sort of a bit of a signature of his, really, that on at least one brown horse he would paint a creamy coloured tail and mane, and I always liked it, and he was a good friend, and he's sorely missed, and it is 10 years this year since he passed away, which is incredible. He'd be 66 this year, which is also incredible to think about. He was a stalwart of the Stoke War Games group. And I've travelled the length and breadth of this fair isle in a car with him to shows north, east, south and west. He was a constant companion with me. And we get to the shows and usually split up and agree to meet for lunch. But you could guarantee to find him at some point during your wanders around these shows, on his hands and knees, beneath a stall, rummaging through some offcasts or miscasts box, or some deal box, or otherwise picking up a whole army of something like Napoleonic Austrians, is the one I remember specifically, but ancients, and back again. So yeah, Martin was a real stalwart of the club. As I say, I did travel the length and breadth of the country to shows. I remember one classic year when we went to salute at Kensington Town Hall. I think it must have been a 6 o'clock start for us. That's the only time I ever went to salute at the Kensington Town Hall, actually. Had a great day at the show, as we always did. Got in the car and we're nattering away about, no doubt, about projects that we were planning and games that we'd seen. No doubt Martin would have used the phrase splendiferous. It was a favourite one of his, to describe something that had really caught his eye. And before we knew it, instead of heading north back up to Staffordshire, Stoke-on-Trent, we were halfway to Reading, and we'd taken a wrong turn and gone about an hour out of our way on the way home. But that is just typical. The times when we've been travelling in convoy with other members of the club and got lost en route, obviously prior to satellite navigation. Okay, I'm just trying to mix up a bit of a reddish brown here, and that'll do nicely. It became a it became a real running joke as we would get lost en route to some of these shows. I well remember a time when we went to, I think it was the Partnack show, the show in York, probably when it was still at the Merchant Hall in the middle of York Town Centre. 3 cars travelling in convoy, and I insist that I know the route, take a turn off a roundabout, travel for best part of half an hour, maybe longer actually, and end up back at the same roundabout that we'd come off. So yeah, we have many adventures as a club with likes of John, hello John, and Tom, his brother now in the States, Martin, Barry, Keith, Mark White, Tim Simpkin. These are all names that will resonate with people listening to this who are from the Stoke Club. Legends of old. Not calling them old, but certainly legends in their time. So I'm just adding a bit of grey, far too much grey again. Really, this is something that once I get these coat d'arms paints, I'll no longer struggle with, because they are the flip top paints that you don't need to squeeze out onto a palette and invariably squeeze out too much, but just giving the I was going to say the standard bearer, I don't think they're called standard bearers, I think the guidon, I don't know, guidon, that's probably not right, as it doesn't sound right as I'm saying it. You think after 35 years of painting these figures, I'd know what it is. And it's on a postcard. Guidon bearer, is that the right word? Guidon. Anyway, that's the horses done, and it's all the brown done. So I think we move on to the principal colour, which is white, and this bottle is running out, but that should be enough. Probably too much. There we go. Another splatter, another splodge. So there's been some discussion amongst people I know, Les in particular, to discuss the pros and cons of a black undercoat. And for many years, having started painting on black undercoat, so I really started proper wargame painting, or wargames figure painting, in the early to mid 90s, I would guess, when the Kevin Dallimore style was almost the sort of accepted method of painting figures. I followed that and was doing the old 3 colour highlights, and goodness me, it took me forever to paint that figure. And then I found Army Painter and started to use their dip, although I never actually dipped the figures. I would always paint the dip on, having sprayed the figure in the base colour. So the first time I used it was painting some Peter Pig American Civil War. And I remember prepping the whole army of the Union and the Confederate actually at the same time, spraying the Union with the dark blue and spraying the Confederates with grey, and then promptly painting up the army in double quick time and using the dip. And I was very happy, and I stuck with that style for a long time. But there's always more than one way to skin a cat, and I've sort of developed this style that I'm using now to increase the efficiency, because the amount of actual paint that you put on these figures is minimal, really. And although I've not done it with the these dismounted figures, I would ordinarily have given them that quite strong dry brush. So I'm struggling here to pick out where the strapping is and where it isn't. But thankfully, I don't really care. I know roughly where it is. And as I said in that first video, once we get the wash onto these figures, then it won't really matter, because the wash will seek out and find those creases, crevices and deeper parts of the figure. So really I'm just tickling this paint onto the figure in approximately the right areas. I know there's black cross belts on the back which is supporting the cartridge pouch and the water canteen. And modern paints have got a real thick pigment to them. Certainly a lot of the Army Painter paints, the Coat d'Arms paints, the Vallejo paints have got a real strong pigment, so they don't struggle to cover over the white undercoat at all, which used to always be one of the issues with painting on black undercoat. And I think, as I've mentioned before, I don't like using black when I'm painting. For some reason, I don't know why. I just don't like it. I find it quite boring, which is ironic, really, because a lot of people find painting in general boring. But in any case, you pay your money, you take your choice, and these are my figures, and this is how I'm painting them. So I don't really care what anybody else thinks, because I've found my own level. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. I found my own level with miniature painting, and it's a level that satisfies me and the aesthetic that I'm looking for. So I think historically, if I was still painting in that Army Painter style, and the Army Painter style really is about is really adding a wash to the figure. It just happens to be a varnish, really, that sinks very well into the nooks and crannies of figures. I'm not particularly happy with him, but anyway, I think the thing is that, for instance, I would spray the Union figures dark blue, but in actual fact, if you look at your typical Union uniform or Wargames figure. The actual coat, which is the dark blue bit, can't really be seen that much because you've got black straps, you've got the white strap of the canteen, you might have a backpack on. So the actual amount of dark blue is relatively minimal. And yet I was spraying the whole thing in dark blue and then fighting almost to... I painted the end of it. I wondered what that bit was there. I painted the end of his carbine in white. But again, let's just move on. It's not a major issue. And similarly with, I remember painting up a War of Independence army, funnily enough, and painting the British, and spray painting the British infantry red, because I'm thinking I'm going to save time here, because I'm spraying red on and then it's just a case of filling in the details. But actually the amount of the red coat that you can actually see on a figure is pretty minimal. If you take a look at an AWI miniature, just see how much red you can actually see. Is it the predominant colour, or actually is something like white a more predominant colour? I'd argue that white is, certainly for the British. But then moving on to the black undercoat, anything that I'm not painting here, where I'm just dabbing on this white, anything that I don't dab the white on and remains in the black will remain as shadow. And obviously the the Reichland flesh undercoat will sink into it and just, well, it almost blends the colour and the black together and gives the whole figure sort of that uniform appearance. I remember speaking to, I think it was Dave Marshall from TM, him of the incredible museum quality scratch builds. You can find him, I think, on Facebook. I was speaking to him in his very early days when he built the most incredible Wild West town, when cowboys were all the rage with manufacturers and articles in magazines and the like. He would build everything and paint those buildings up to that wonderful standard, and then everything would get a coat of a sepia wash, because it just binds everything together and gives it that same tone of colour. And that's the similar thing that happens with the wash here. And you'll see shortly, hopefully you will. So I'll just dab the last bit of white into there. I need to just go a little bit down the middle of his chest. And again, it's just the suggestion of colour. So I am thinking that blue isn't strong enough. So what I will do, I think it's probably a little bit too dark, so I'm going to cheat and move away from the intention of having as few colours as possible, but better to recognise that now and correct it than do nothing about it and be unhappy with the end product. So this is crystal blue from, yeah, absolutely, that's what was needed. That is better already. In actual fact, let's do the turban that I'd missed off. So this goes across the front of the helmet. There we go. This is a far better blue. And of course, you need a slightly brighter colour than perhaps you initially think, because the wash will tone these colours down somewhat. And again, although I don't profess to be any kind of quality painter at all, I paint a lot of figures, but I can't say that they're of a standard that would please many people. I do want to try and get the right colours. It's that painting by numbers thing. I want to try and get some colours that are relatively authentic, so that when you look at the figure you recognise that, oh yes, that's the third Continental Light Dragoons. Of course it is. They're in that white coat with that blue trim. Now, can I get, yes. There we go. So I'm possibly fussing a little bit more over these figures than I did those light bobs or the Wars of the Roses figures. But for the sake of, well, it's 12 figures, I'm doing this too. And the other thing is, this was something that was interesting. When I first started out, another stalwart of the Stoke Club, who no longer attends but still paints figures, and I hope he's very well, that's Jeff Davis, Civil War maestro. He once said to me, the thing is, once you've painted the unit, once they're done, then they're done. And they're in your collection. And yeah, your standards of painting might change as you go through your collection. But once I've painted this unit, the 3rd Continental Dragoons, I don't have to do them again. They are done. And they will be a part of my army for as long as I choose to A, either keep these figures, or B, shuffle off this mortal coil and they get sold on to some lucky person for no doubt a fraction of what they're worth. That's an interesting thing actually, because rarely, I think the market for second-hand figures has absolutely fallen for some reason, and particularly in this scale. So don't shoot me, but about 4 weeks ago I was contemplating selling a lot of my 15mm collection because I don't use it, and that's really brought on by the pandemic, just that bit of a malaise, I think. A malaise came over me regarding all these figures that I've got, these collections that I've built up and painted. I've actually forgotten about this bit across the blanket roll, so I need to go, oh no, yes, I need to go back and do that. And I approached a well-known reseller, a chap who will buy up collections, and the offer was less than the metal price, the bare metal price of the figure. And I flatly refused that. I think I might have made a counter offer at the time, which took it up to just beyond the bare metal price, and he turned it down. Thank goodness he did, because I do love that. It was my English Civil War collection. I do love that collection. I would have been devastated now, as my motivation, enthusiasm, mojo, whatever it is, has returned for painting and collecting my 15mm figures. These figures mean a heck of a lot to me. I put a lot of effort. Okay. Oh. They might not be the highest quality painted figures you're ever going to see, but I put a lot of effort into painting them. These don't, you know, where am I now? About 46 minutes in. I know I'm really just waffling on at the moment, but I possibly could paint these quicker if I wasn't talking so much, and I didn't have a tripod in between me and the figure. But they do mean a lot to me, and I do put a lot of time and effort into collecting these armies and making them available for clubmates to have a game. So I will normally, particularly with the Peter Pig figures, I'll normally collect both sides and take, and the scenery, and take them down to the club. Right, okay, we're not doing too bad with these actually. This might be a unit of cavalry, and the dismount's done in around an hour. 47 minutes in. So we've got skeleton bone now as the colour of choice for the strides of these guys. Again, it's about getting the colour roughly in the right place, that sort of colour by numbers aspect of this style of painting. And I don't tend to water down the paint. The brush is wet, so that certainly helps, but I want a relatively strong coat of paint on the figure. And it does shrink as it dries, it shrinks into the creases. I think quite often you'll hear people say you need to water your paint down because you will obscure the detail a bit. I'm not entirely sure. Well, that may be true on some very, very fine quality figures, but and that's not to say these aren't quality figures, because I absolutely think they are. I think these are the best 15mm figures on the market. But I just haven't experienced that loss of detail, because there are 2 coats of paint on most areas here. So there's the undercoat, which is the black, and then there's the base colour, and then there's going to be a wash, which is a very watered down paint. So let's say 2.5 layers of paint, and most figures, I think most modern figures, can take that amount of paint. In fact, if you paint in the Dallimore style, then you're putting on a lot of coats of paint, albeit very thin. There's considerably more coats now. So let's just tickle in that there. I'm just going to give the reins a little dabble there just to add that little bit of variety in there. It's probably not needed. In fact, I can't get to the trousers. Or maybe I can just in there. There we go, it's just a dab. Because again, the black undercoat does the job. And that's just reminded me because I need to paint the tail in that tribute to Martin. Every single cavalry unit I paint, whether it's 6mm, 10mm, 15mm, 28mm, will always have a horse with, I think we'll do it on the command officer, the officer or the bugler, I think. So as soon as I do this, as soon as I put this colour on the mane and the tail, it just reminds me of Martin. I get a very melancholy feel when I do it, but it is my little tribute in paint to Martin. And he painted figures for people at the club, and they've still got those figures. Keith Knight, very good friend from the War Games Club. Huge collection of fantasy and, well, mainly fantasy actually, but some science fiction. But Martin painted quite a lot of figures for him, and he's still got them. And in fact, his style of painting was very much ahead of its time, because I think if the army painter dips or the washes had been around then, he would have been all over it like a rash, because his style of painting was like what I do now prior to the wash. It was a lovely style of painting, beautiful, and he painted many figures for me. But I don't think Martin ever had any sort of illusions that he was the best figure painter in the world. He was just a very good figure painter and could churn out figures like there's no tomorrow. So where are we? Let's have a look. Yeah, I think we're really just down to flesh and metal. So the army painter just dried a little bit in the, so there we go. Yeah, flesh and metal, and we're done. Is a figure done before it's based? There's a question for you to ponder, because I often consider that it is, but obviously I can't put it on the table until flags are added and bases are done. I have, just before starting this video, put an order into base text for some more brown basing material. So I can't actually, that's what I'm going to use for these. I can't actually finish these bases until that arrives. It'll be interesting. I've never ever put an order into Colour Party who make base text. I've never put a mail order into them. In 35 years, they were the very first paints I ever owned for miniature painting, very first acrylic paints I owned, and they were lovely. You get them in a little starter box, a little cardboard box full of with 6 paints in. And I think I painted my first 15mm American Civil War army using them. You may be able to hear the wind. There's an absolute gale and downpour outside of my bunker window. I don't know if I'm in the office or the bunker. I had a very nice plaque for the door given to me one Christmas by my lovely wife. But when I went to hang it on the door, she said, "Oh, no, that's just for hanging up in the office. Can't have that on display outside the door." But anyway, yes, so Colour Party are... I've been in this hobby longer than I have. And their base text is lovely for basing figures, oddly enough. It's just a textured paint really, and there's many other companies that do something similar, including now Games Workshop. But I've used it off and on for many years and just like the style of it. Just realised I've got a bugle to paint there, and that can't be painted in silver, so I will have to stop the video shortly and come back to it, because I haven't got the bronze or the brass or whatever colour I'm going to use ready to paint it. Okay, that's done. Let's just pause for a second. And as if by magic we're back. This is the colour I tend to use for brassy, bronzy, goldy colours. It's called Old Gold from Vallejo. It's my absolute favourite paint, and I've had this, I must have had this for years, because you don't tend to use a lot of this colour. The figures I paint, but it's literally just a stroke over the top there. Yeah, we're going to be done in an hour here, and that's with a lot of waffling. Let's just paint the hilt of these swords. See as we're here. In, well, it is gold, but it's actually representing sort of a brassy colour. Certainly once the wash is on it, it will tone down. I just love these figures. I can't help it. I love them. If I'm a Peter Pig fanboy, then so be it. That is what I am. Interestingly, these strippers have obviously left their sabres on their horses. There you go. Okay, last colour before the wash. We're 58 minutes and 7 seconds in. So that's an hour for 12 figures and 6 horses. Actually, there's one more bit I need to do that's just hit me between the eyes, and that's the straps of these here carbines that these fellas are using. So to paint the metal furniture of the musket, it's just a dab on the end of the barrel, flatter the brush across the top, and then a little tickle where the firing mechanism is. And it really is as simple as that, and we just do the backs of it, obviously. And I'm assuming all the pouches of these figures are in black. Are. English is quite difficult sometimes. There we go. The guidon bearer. Shall we settle on guidon bearer? Sounds okay to me. Where are we? 59 minutes 42 seconds. Oh my goodness. Come on. Can we do it? I'm not actually finished, obviously, because I've got that little bit to go back to. But for all intents and purposes, there we go, we're over the hour mark. It's not a race. I wasn't challenged to paint these in under an hour, but it's as near as damn it to an hour. Some people might wish to do a bit of a dry brush over the top of these figures. I don't wish to do a dry brush over the top of these figures, but some might, just to raise the tone. If you did, it'd be sort of a cream or a white dry brush. It'd have to be an incredibly dry brush. So whereas that dry brush of the figures, it as a black undercoat, was a pretty heavy dry brush, this would be the most dry brush that you could get. So you'd have to really scrub your figure till almost you can't see any more paint coming off on the cloth that you're brushing it on. And it's now going through my mind as to whether to do that, just to show you what I mean. Shall we? Let's do it. So I want a pretty big brush for this. Let's use this cream colour I've got here, this bone colour. And this is just for you guys. This is, I wouldn't ordinarily do this. Some people would do this. So I'm going to get paint on the end of the brush. That's actually mixed some grey into it. Okay, let's start that again. Don't really want grey tone to it. So brush is nice and dry. So I'm just working that into the bristles there, and brushing this off. A good tip is to brush it across your fingers and just see if it's picking up your fingerprints. So there's virtually nothing on there. And it is that on. So you might be able to see on the boot there it's picked up a little bit. Certainly on the horses and the black bits of the tail it's picking up a little bit. But that's literally all you need. You don't really want any more than that. So on the flank of this sort of reddish horse here, you can see, there you go, let's just take a bit off, just wetted the tip of my finger there and drew it off. What it will do is just highlight a little bit the cartridge boxes, pouches, etc. that they're carrying. This would have been picked up ordinarily with that dry brush right at the start of the process that I didn't do on these figures, but a little bit of a dry brush just brings it together. I wouldn't ordinarily do that, but that's just for your benefit. Okay, the last bit then. Now, because these are white, principally, I've got Agrax as well. Let's just see how this goes. I'm not entirely sure how it will react, so it's always worth just having a contingency in place. I've got one of my cheap brushes here. loosen up those bristles a bit and let's see how we do. So I'm going to start with Reichland Flash Shade, and as before it's really about getting the colour onto the figure. Let's just do him. I'm having, I think, is that okay? If I wipe it off almost immediately and wick away the bit there. Right, so there you, that's definite brownish tinge to the white there. Let's just have a look how it looks with, this is live experimentation and shows that you can just adapt the technique however you see fit. So this is with Agrax all over it, which is the darker brown. But because it's over white, it might just be the more appropriate colour. So again, I'll just touch it with my finger just to get it off those highlights. And then wick away the bit there. I think Agrax is the one I'm going to go with for the rest of these figures. Because white is a weird one really, because you don't really want the figure to look white. You want it to look almost off-white, because a bright white looks really unnatural to the eye. Alex Sotheran, I know he will be very pleased I'm using Agrax. But I'm fairly sure, I may be misremembering here, I'm fairly sure Alex will go back and do a little bit of re-highlighting, which is a step beyond what I'm normally prepared to do with my figure painting. I think just by drawing my finger over the top surface, you can use a sponge for this actually. A bit of Billy Goat Wargaming patented 3-ply tissue. Yeah, I'm much happier with that. So it's turned the white there into more of an off-white, and it's deepened a little bit the blue, so that's a much more acceptable look. Sorry these videos are so long, hope you don't mind. Maybe I should just do the one figure on camera and then come back and show you the unit. That might be the way to go. Not everybody has got an hour to sit and watch these. I'm waiting on a delivery from Amazon, so every time I hear a car outside I'm getting very excited at the thought that my new lapel mic and boom camera holder are coming, and I hope the next video that I put up on the channel will be using those items, which very possibly will be a review of either the Peter Pig Vietnam rules or the English Civil War rules. Right, so let's take the blotter. Let's just, and this just lifts off that sort of, it wicks away a little bit the very deepest parts of the figure, but leaves the wash where you want it. I'm quite happy with them. You could actually leave the figures at this point in this condition. You don't need to add the wash, particularly over a black undercoat, because the black really helps to define the other colours. But I've been adding washes and dips and inks and stains to figures for so long. It's almost automatic for me to do it, and can't bring myself not to do it. But you could not do it. It'd be an interesting process, I think, to try and not add the wash. You know, it's a really haphazard approach to painting, and my approach isn't perhaps for everybody. But where are we? We're 1 hour 10 minutes into this video. I think in future painting videos I'll paint 1 or 2 figures to demonstrate the technique, and then show you the whole unit. But there you go. This is the 3rd Regiment of Continental Light Dragoons for the Continental Army of the American Civil War, including the 6 dismounted figures for when they jump off the horses, because they were light infantry really. These weren't cavalry in the sense of Napoleonic cavalry. These were intended to get off the horse and use their carbines as much as it was to have a full-on charge using their sabres. But there we go. Hope you enjoyed that. Lots more to come from Billy Goat Wargaming.